Rome's greatest enemy was 80% African, and they never taught you that in school. Think about everything you learned in history class. The battles. The generals. The empires. Now ask yourself a simple question: who was actually standing on those battlefields? Because when Western education handed you the story of Hannibal Barca, they gave you one man, one name, one face, and quietly erased an entire continent of warriors who made that campaign possible. 90,000 soldiers marched out of North Africa to shake the Roman Republic to its foundation. Libyan heavy infantry who held formations that broke Roman legions. Numidian cavalry who could outride anything Rome had ever seen. Iberian and Galatian fighters who had allied with the Carthaginian Empire that was, at its core, an African power. This is not a footnote. This is the story. And today, we are telling it in full. To understand why this matters, you have to understand what Carthage actually was. Not the cartoon villain Rome painted in its history books. Not simply a rival city-state to be destroyed. Carthage was a civilization, a Mediterranean superpower built on African soil, with African people at the center of its economic and military engine. Founded around 814 BC by Phoenician settlers on the northeastern coast of what is now Tunisia, Carthage grew over centuries into something unprecedented, a naval empire that controlled trade routes from the western Mediterranean all the way across North Africa, commanding ports in Sicily, Sardinia, Corsica, and the southern Iberian Peninsula. By the 3rd century BC, Carthage was generating annual revenues estimated by ancient sources at levels that dwarfed most competing powers in the ancient world. The city itself held a population of several 100,000 people, making it one of the largest urban centers on earth at that time. Its harbors could hold up to 220 warships simultaneously. Its markets moved grain, purple dye, tin, copper, silver, and ivory. Carthage was not a city on the edge of Africa. Carthage was Africa's face to the world. When Hannibal Barca was born around 247 BC, he was born into this world, into a military family, into an empire that had already fought one devastating war against Rome and lost significant territory in the process. His father, Hannibal Barca, was one of Carthage's most brilliant generals, a man who had kept Roman forces at bay in Sicily for years and who, after Carthage's defeat in the First Punic War in 241 BC, took his army to Iberia to rebuild Carthaginian power and resource extraction. Hannibal grew up in military camps. He learned war as a language before he learned diplomacy. By the time he assumed command of Carthaginian forces in Iberia around 221 BC at approximately 26 years old, he was already shaped by decades of watching how armies moved, how alliances were forged, and how Rome operated. He understood something that most of his contemporaries did not: Rome could not be defeated at sea, could not be strangled through naval blockade, and could not be outmaneuvered politically unless it was struck at home. The only way to break Rome was to march directly to its doorstep. In 218 BC, Hannibal launched what remains one of the most audacious military campaigns in recorded human history. He crossed the Pyrenees with approximately 90,000 infantry, 12,000 cavalry, and 37 war elephants. He crossed the Rhone River against resistance. Then he did what no military commander had done before him: he crossed the Alps in late autumn, a journey of roughly 15 days through freezing mountain passes, losing tens of thousands of soldiers and most of his elephants in the process. But what survived was a battle-hardened, fiercely loyal army that reached the Italian peninsula ready for war. And here is where the composition of that army becomes critical, because the soldiers who made it across those mountains were not primarily European mercenaries. The backbone of Hannibal's force was African. The Libyan heavy infantry, recruited from the settled agricultural populations of North Africa, were equipped with Roman-style weapons and armor after capturing Roman supplies following early victories, making them nearly indistinguishable from Roman soldiers in close-quarter formation fighting. These men had trained for years. They were disciplined, literate in the mechanics of war, and extraordinarily effective. The Numidians, drawn from the kingdoms of what is now northwestern Algeria, northeastern Algeria, and parts of Tunisia and Libya, provided the cavalry that would become Hannibal's most decisive weapon on every major battlefield. These were horsemen who rode without saddles, who communicated with their mounts through pressure and balance, who could execute flanking maneuvers at speeds that Roman cavalry simply could not match. Mahabo, the Numidian cavalry commander under Hannibal, was so effective that after the Battle of Cannae, he famously told Hannibal, according to Livy, that if they marched immediately to Rome, they could be dining in the capital within 5 days. The battles Hannibal fought in Italy between 218 and 216 BC were not close contests. They were systematic destruction of Roman military power at a scale Rome had never experienced. At the Battle of the Trebia River in December 218 BC, Hannibal's forces, with African infantry at the center and Numidian cavalry on the flanks, destroyed approximately 20,000 Roman soldiers out of an army of 40,000. At Lake Trasimene in June 217 BC, Hannibal executed a perfect ambush, killing roughly 15,000 Romans in under 4 hours, one of the most complete ambushes in ancient military history. Then came Cannae on August 2, 216 BC. 70,000 Roman and Allied soldiers killed in a single afternoon. The ancient sources, Polybius, Livy, Appian, all describe Cannae as the greatest single-day defeat in Roman military history. The Numidian cavalry broke the Roman horsemen on both flanks. The Libyan infantry executed a double envelopment that encircled and annihilated the Roman center. The tactical genius was Hannibal's. But the physical